The Supreme Court has agreed to hear a case about whether this is in Texas, whether Texas officials should have, Lawrence Hurley writing for, I believe it's for Reuters, whether Texas officials should have approved a specialty license plate that displays the Confederate flag. The Sons of Confederate Veterans are saying that this is their free speech right to have a Confederate flag on their license plate, that Confederate soldiers are among their ancestors and they're simply celebrating their ancestry. On the other hand, there's a fairly substantial number of people, particularly people of color, who are suggesting that the Confederate flag, or at least the Confederate battle flag, which is the one that's typically used, the stars and bars, are the symbols of the Klan and of hate crimes. So Matthew Heimbach is back with us. He's the president of the Traditionalist Youth Network, a member of the League of the South. He's a former member of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, and he founded the White Student Union while at Towson University. Trad Youth, as in traditional, tradyouth.org is his website. Matthew, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me on, Tom.
So, as a white guy who loves the Confederate flag, I guess, how do you not get that the Confederate flag to a lot of people means hate?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I think the biggest issue here is just because people are offended by someone's identity and the symbols that matter to them, I don't think that should be a reason that we shouldn't be allowed to show those symbols. Here in the great state of Indiana, where I live, we have the Indiana Black Expo, where it's essentially where blacks are able to display their pride in their culture. And some people might have a problem, not necessarily with black culture, but with the idea of identity politics. But it doesn't really matter. It's the fact that people should be allowed to honor their ancestors, honor the symbols that matter to them. And just because people are offended, that doesn't give a right that we should be able to silence free speech.
But part of the black heritage, part of the black identity is not that they committed genocide on white people, whereas part of the white heritage, and particularly the Confederate heritage, is that they did commit genocide on black people. Are you suggesting that if somebody has an ancestor who was a Nazi, that they should have a swastika on their car?
Well, Tom, the thing is, if you look, there are Native American plates, and before the white man ever came to North America, Indian tribes were killing one another, enslaving one another. The Lakota and the Pawnee enslaved one another all the time. In terms of the black slaves who came here, that it was generally blacks in Africa who enslaved other blacks through warfare. And
Matthew, you're doing a marvelous job of blaming the victims here, but you're factually wrong.
No,
the fact of the matter is that yes, hang on just a second here. I can't let this stand. I've written books on anthropology, particularly the history of the Native Americans. Yes, there were times of conflict among Native American tribes, and yes, some of them were quite substantial. And typically they were caused by climate change, oddly enough, pushing people from one territory into another. But by and large, most tribes lived in peace with each other because nobody wanted somebody else's land. They didn't want their ghosts. I mean, look it up. The slave traders in Africa, yeah, but they wouldn't have been selling the slaves if white people from Europe hadn't gone and said, hey, let me give you some money to capture some people. You can't blame the victims. You have to own up to the fact that slavery happened in the United States for hundreds of years. It was a cruel and vicious practice. It's inconsistent with human values. It's inconsistent with American values, and celebrating slavery in any way or trying to make excuses for it by saying, well, Indians and black people did it too, is just as wrong as celebrating it in the first place.
Now, Tom, I'm not here to defend slavery. But I guarantee...
But that's what you just tried to do.
No. But the thing is, if you look, being locked into an economic situation that's wrong does not mean you must demonize the entire group of people. I guarantee the majority of your listeners, myself and you included, have clothes on our back right now that are made in sweatshops in China or places in Southeast Asia. That is a little better than slavery, the treatment those people are dealt with. But simply because we are part of the capitalist system does not mean that we have to forever be carrying around baggage and feeling guilty about what our ancestors did. Now, I'm not supporting slavery, but I will not hate my ancestors and the symbols that they sacrificed their lives for simply because it offends other people. Every group of people has a right to an identity, a right to their own symbols, and a right to exist, and that's all I'm fighting for. And the Confederacy, love it or hate it, is my people and our symbols.
I got that. So, to my question, if I had ancestors who had fought in Hitler's army, and I was proud of them, maybe not proud of what they did. I'm guessing you're not proud of your ancestors owning slaves or the way they treated their slaves, but hey, they're your ancestors. We all have to deal with the baggage of our past. Do you think that somebody who had a Nazi soldier should proudly display a swastika on their car?
I think everybody has the right to be able to support their own identity and their own history. I mean, you look here in America, the persecution of Palestinians by Israel. No one would want to take away the Jews' right to be able to have pride in their own people. But I think all of us can agree the apartheid regime in Israel is against all human rights, using the weapons they use against innocent civilians, bombing housing complexes and hospitals. That's horrendous. But no one wants to stop Jews from being able to have their own identity.
You're throwing up a straw man and changing the subject. We're talking about the Confederate. We're talking about slavery in the United States.
No, we're talking about identity, that every group of people on this planet, every ethnic group, has a right to their own identity, and we shouldn't have to apologize for it.
So you're suggesting that the identity of people, of white people with ancestors from the South, such as yourself, that identity is so bound up in slavery that the only symbol that you can think of to proudly proclaim your heritage is the battle flag of the Confederate Army, which was fighting a war explicitly and specifically to preserve slavery.
No, we have a lot of different symbols. We have a lot of different cultural customs that we all participate in. But most importantly, it comes down to not that the Confederate battle flag is the only symbol for us. It's that I think Southerners, we just refuse to apologize because we don't need to. It's our symbol. It's our identity. No other group of people.
So your identity that you're proud of is that your ancestors owned and presumably beat and raped and murdered slaves. That's what you're proud of. That's your identity.
The reason I love my family is not because of any of their attributes, whether they're tall, short, smart, stupid. It doesn't matter. There are plenty of horrible warts on the face of every group of people's ancestors, their history. But I refuse to turn my back on my own family, and that's what your
I understand that, Matthew, and I think that that's a totally human impulse, and probably at some level a noble one. I'm just asking, can't you find a symbol which is not the in-your-face to black people symbol of the stars and bars? Can't you find another symbol as the one to demonstrate your Southern Confederate States of America heritage?
The Confederate battle flag has over 300,000 martyrs of Southern men who gave life and limb to fight for it,
to preserve slavery.
Whether they believed in slavery or not, that they saw defending their homes and their families.
Jefferson Davis said that they were fighting a war to preserve slavery. This is not a matter of dispute.
And you know what? The Union Army, that I think it was horrendous, the fact that you've got white men on both sides, many of whom were Christians, killing each other, where at the end of the day, capitalists and bankers and corrupt politicians are the ones who end up winning.
But what does that have to do with your wanting to have a symbol that says to black people that you're proud that your ancestors enslaved them on your car?
I am proud that my ancestors were willing to stand on their own 2 feet against horrendous odds.
But don't you get it that a black person will look at your car and say he's proud of being of having slaveholders in his family?
I should never have to apologize for my ancestors and my identity, Tom.
Okay. Matthew Heimbach, president of the Traditionalist Youth Network and a member of the League of the South. His website, tradyouth, TRADYOUTH.org. Matthew, thanks for dropping by today.
Thanks so much, Tom.
Good talking to you. We'll be back. It's 15 minutes past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Germany has actually banned the swastika. If you show up in Germany with a swastika, you go to jail. Should we do something like that with the Confederate flag here or not?